that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it's made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the vanguard of personal freedom, personal liberty, and personal responsibility, Mojo 50 Radio. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB, News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Happy to be with you. I want to ask a question. How many of you recall the words that Van Jones used to describe the unfolding election result back in November 2016?
Well, look, first of all, congratulations. Both of you guys were...
We're not there yet.
well, you're further than anybody said you would be. And I have enough class, and I was raised well enough to say when you outdo...
Yes, sir. Thank you.
When you outdo expectations, good for you. But there's another side to this. People have talked about a miracle. I'm hearing about a nightmare. It's hard to be a parent tonight for a lot of us. You tell your kids, don't be a bully. You tell your kids, don't be a bigot. You tell your kids, do your homework and be prepared. And then you have this outcome, and you have people putting children to bed tonight, and they're afraid of breakfast. They're afraid of, how do I explain this to my children? I have Muslim friends who are texting me tonight saying, should I leave the country? I have families of immigrants that are terrified tonight. This was many things. This was a rebellion against the elites. True, it was a complete reinvention of politics and polls. It's true. But it was also something else. We've talked about race. We've talked about everything but race tonight. We've talked about income. We've talked about class. We've talked about region. We haven't talked about race. This was a white-lash. This was a white-lash against a changing country. It was a white-lash against a black president in part. And that's the part where the pain comes. And Donald Trump has a responsibility tonight to come out and reassure people that he is going to be the president of all the people who he insulted and offended and brushed aside. Yeah, when you say you want to take your country back, you got a lot of people who feel that we're not represented well either. But we don't want to feel that someone has been elected by throwing away some of us to appeal more deeply to others. So this is a deeply painful moment tonight. I know it's not just about race. There's more going on than that. But race is here, too. We got to talk about it.
So race is here, too, and we got to talk about it. Okay, well, let's talk about this. He talked about immigrants. He didn't really talk about black people as much, but he did call it a white-lash. He talked about people who felt that they had not been represented. That describes a significant number of white people in America. There's a recent poll that said 55% of them feel that they're discriminated against in this country, and I understand exactly why. It's because of that diversity nonsense. You talked about people feeling afraid, should I leave the country? The question is this: I have yet to meet anyone who is American who is afraid of other Americans. I haven't met one yet. And I'm not saying they don't exist. I just haven't, and I don't travel in all kinds of circles. But I will say I haven't met anybody. I've met people who are nervous, and they have a reason to be nervous. Immigration has taken a bad hit because the federal government has purposely mishandled immigration for years. So even if you're a legal immigrant, if you get caught up in the backlash, and there's going to be a backlash, there should be a backlash, and it's coming. Let's remember, he's talking about an end of an era. He talked about politics being reinvented, polls being reinvented. What was the reinvention? You've got to remember, before you got to 2016, from 2009 up to that election in November 2016, there had been a political sea change in this country. The Democrat Party had lost more than 1,000 elected seats at various levels of government, local, state, federal. They lost governorships. They went from having a majority of governorships to a minority of governorships. They went from having a majority control in most of the state houses in this country to having less than half, less than 40% control of state houses in the United States. They lost the House, they lost the Senate, and eventually, of course, they lost the presidency. They lost everything because their message stank, and because the person who was representing them at the highest level of government, Barack Obama, was himself one of the most racially polarizing individuals that the nation had ever seen in elected office. And after 8 years of that, there was time for a reaction. But that reaction had been building for 5 decades. We've been telling people for 5 decades, white people for 5 decades, particularly white males, that you cannot speak. A person of color is speaking, you cannot. Something's going on with you that a person of color does not have, and they're not doing as well. It's your fault that they're not doing well. You need to step aside so that this person of color or this woman or woman of color, anything that's not a white male, the white male has been the most blamed individual in America for the past half century. Everything that's wrong with America is because white men have everything. And that's still going on. During the campaign, you heard chants of lock her up, dealing with Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton should have been locked up. The woman committed a crime for which others had gone to jail. For some reason, she did not. We all understand now why, because of the corruption that was in the government through Barack Obama and the progressives that he had brought into the federal government. The people of America, yes, the majority white, those white people. Can I help you guys out? 65% of this country is considered Caucasian. You can't, I want to know how you're going to have a diverse country in America without including the largest demographic therein. That doesn't make any sense to me. How can they not have a seat at the table if they are the largest demographic in the country? Doesn't make a bit of sense. But now they've taken up a new chant at the Trump rallies, and it's in response to others who have come and been very, critical of the nation, of the president, and of the American people. Now, this is how Chris Matthews reported on the new chant on Hardball the night of the rally last week.
Let's take a look at this. At the Trump rally just now, you would hear him, they used to yell, lock her up, meaning Hillary Clinton. Well, tonight there's a new one. Let's listen to the latest chant.
These left-wing ideologues see our nation as a force of evil, the way they speak so badly of our country. They want to demolish our Constitution, weaken our military, eliminate the values that built this magnificent country. You have to look at some of their recent comments, which are never talked about. When you see the 4 congresswomen, oh, isn't that lovely? I'll give you just a couple. I have pages and pages, but we don't want to bore you. We don't want to go too long. Omar has a history of launching vicious anti-Semitic screeds.
You know, the anti-Semitic thing is, I thought that sounded an aspect, but it's not the main point of what those women have been saying at all.
No, but it paints
it of one case.
But it sort of paints them as evil, crazy doers. Look, I think it's stark when you look at how did Reagan launch his re-election. This Morning in America, how did W talked about a more hopeful America. Bill Clinton was a bridge to the 21st century. You had these Americans, whether they're Democrat or Republican, launching their campaigns in sort of a hopeful, sort of bringing America together. Yeah. This guy's launching his campaign talking about how these people hate America. It's dramatically different.
Warren Harding's campaign.
It showed in the cabinet, by the way. Whatever you think of these guys, they did try to diversify their cabinets. That'll be a more recent Republican. So this guy came along.
After World War I, Warren Harding's slogan was "Return to normalcy," which could be maybe adopted by the Democrats. Look, he does this. This is the thing that he actually does best, right? He does this roving, I don't know what you want to call it.
Troubadour.
Yeah, some show, right? Yeah. And he gets the crowd all ginned up, and he says these ridiculous things because the one-offs aren't working, right? So, Mr. Kim, tear down this curb. That didn't work. Build a wall. Mexico is going to pay for that. Didn't work. We're going to take China trade. We don't have any deal with China. That didn't work. And we're going to redo NAFTA. We don't have a redone NAFTA. Nothing's been passed or ratified. That didn't work. So this is all he got. This is all he has.
All he has is racism.
He gets accused very credibly within the last weeks of being a rapist. He says terrible things about ethnic groups. The guy says anything he wants. He's almost up to the level of if I shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue. It's almost.
But it's going to get worse.
Why are they with him that strongly?
Well, to answer Mr. Matthews, for one thing, people are with Trump strongly because we have a better economy, we have more jobs, we have better trade, we have better foreign relations. We're not really at war with anybody. None of that could be said for the 8 years prior to Trump. The country is actually doing better, which means specifically it's not about the government doing better. The American people are actually doing better. The American people. But the interesting thing to me is how they want to focus on race when neither in his tweets or at the rally or even the chants, nobody said anything about race. It is assumed by progressives that if he's talking about someone from Somalia, it must be because she's black. Really. The other thing that's interesting is how they edited. You could tell that they edited the feed or the clip that they got from the rally. Here's PBS playing a relatively similar portion and the portion that preceded the chant. See if you can tell the difference.
Omar laughed that Americans speak of al-Qaeda in a menacing tone and remarked that you don't say America with this intensity. You say al-Qaeda makes you proud. Al-Qaeda makes you proud. You don't speak that way about America. And at a press conference just this week, when asked whether she supported al-Qaeda, that's our enemy. That's our enemy. They are a very serious problem that we take care of, but they always seem to come along somewhere. She refused to answer. She didn't want to give an answer to that question. Omar blamed the United States for the crisis in Venezuela. You think of that one. And she looks down with contempt on the hard-working Americans, saying that ignorance is pervasive in many parts of this country. And obviously and importantly, Omar has a history of launching vicious anti-Semitic screeds.
Notice the difference between what actually happened at the rally and what MSNBC, Chris Matthews, chose to bring out. He ran through the litany, or part of the litany, of all the things that Ilhan Omar had said negatively about the United States or against the United States. Proud of Al-Qaeda? Wow. Okay. Al-Qaeda had something to do with bringing down the Twin Towers in New York. Why would you be proud of them? When asked to denounce them, she would not. She wouldn't even respond to the question. She talked about the ignorance of Americans. And that's when the chant began. Not only are you siding with the enemies of America, those who had attacked America, you're calling us ignorant? Get out of here. Well, send her back. Yes, because she's a Somali. Send her back to Somalia. Nothing wrong with that. You got a problem with that? I don't. This isn't about Trump's tweets. This is about the reaction of the American people to what the AOC coven of witches say. And this is another member of that coven. She thinks Americans are ignorant. She wants to praise Al-Qaeda, who killed 3,000 Americans plus in one day by flying planes into buildings. Are you really surprised that somebody is not crazy about this woman? Can I ask you a question? Since we're all into chants now, and, condemning people because of chants, where was Chris Matthews and the progressive left when these chants were being put out there? That was New York City, December 2014, and if you couldn't make it out, there was a call and response chant. What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want it? Now. I don't remember the condemnation from MSNBC, CNN, CBS, ABC. I missed that. Or how about this one from August of 2015. Here's a story from a local affiliate about another chant that the anti-police crowd liked to repeat.
In Minnesota, chants from Black Lives Matter protesters are drawing disgust from police. The protesters took to the streets Saturday in St. Paul outside of the state fair, yelling, quote, "Pigs in a blanket, fry 'em like bacon," end quote. Some believe the chant refers to putting police officers in body bags. Many police found the chant insensitive, while protesters believe it's misinterpreted.
Statements and chants like that are just ignorant. I find it absolutely disgusting.
It definitely wasn't a threat. I don't know if they would have received it differently if we'd have said maybe on a stick or something like that. But, we're out there chanting. We're using our voices.
And the officer you heard from there added he doesn't think police care about an apology, but would like for protesters to change their rhetoric.
Again, I don't recall the massive reaction from the media to condemn people saying that cops should be fried like bacon. I don't recall that. And you heard one of the protest leaders, if you will, minimalizing, we're just using our voices. Let me ask this question. So if you use your voice to call for the death of law enforcement officers, that's just using your voice. But that's because you're black, of course. Now, when a white person who finally speaks up and says, you know what, all these clowns in this country who don't like this country and want to say that I'm stupid or I'm ignorant because I don't think like they do, get them up out of here. Why are they not doing anything more than just using their voices? Send her back. Well, it was racist because they didn't say where. They didn't say send the racial slur back. They just said her. Is her now a racial slur? I tend to doubt that. But here's what I really don't doubt. We've had 50 years of white people being told that they're not allowed to speak. What we're now seeing is 2 years and counting of people getting past that and white folks finding their voice again. Of course, it's going to be a little bit clumsy. They haven't been able to say anything for 5 decades. What they're finally doing is, sometimes you have boxers who, basically they walk through the jab. They finally figure out that even though you have a good jab, it's not good enough to hurt them. They just walk through it and start hitting you. White people are walking through the POC jab. You're a racist. They're not hearing that anymore. It's not affecting them the same way anymore. You got white privilege. They're like, get that mess out of here too. And they are coming for all the POC chants and the ideologies that minimalize and disparage them. They're the largest demographic in the country, and they have decided that they don't need black people to affirm their goodness as human beings. They've decided they do not need the agreement of immigrants, particularly not illegal immigrants, as to whether or not this is the best country on the planet. They're done apologizing, increasingly done apologizing. That's where the left has a problem. And again, this whole thing, they keep trying to make this about Trump. At least in this case, they couldn't really make it about Trump because Trump wasn't the one chanting. Trump was simply the one feeding them the information about what this woman had said. And you got a very American reaction. Americans are a nice people. They're a kind people. They're also a very proud people. So while you're talking about a White-Lash, which is here, remember the message that Trump gave in 2016 and why it resonated. America was good, but her greatness was ebbing away. We need to make America great again. We need to stop the notion that the government was more concerned about illegal immigrants, other immigrants as well, more concerned about immigrants than about law-abiding citizens. We need to do something about the fact that the Republican Party is a bunch of liars. And the Democrats want to emulate Europe or even third world countries. That's what was going on with the American people. They knew that the Democrats were horrific, but the Republicans simply lied about being different. And they believed that they could do and be better. That's what this is about. And Donald Trump has given them their voice. Well, what about Charlottesville? This ain't about Charlottesville. The folks who were there chanting, they're not praising Charlottesville and what happened there. They don't care about that. What they do care about is that they are now going to be heard, and they are done going for the you're a racist and the race and racist race card and all this other stuff. They're through going for the okie doke. So understand now, the people of color, the POC crowd, they are now getting very uncomfortable. And the rhymes with Negroes, the Negroes, they are shook because their rhetoric's not working anymore. And white progressives, the ones behind all this, they are throwing every anti-Trump, anti-American, anti-family, anti-citizen, anti-Jesus, anti-motherhood, anti-anything that they can. They're just throwing it against the wall, hoping that something will stick and resonate with someone that is not currently a member of their base, and it's not working very well. The problem is this. If the American white demographic becomes fully woke, which means something totally different to them than it does to all the social justice warriors, the progressives are going to learn just how small their base is. And they may have a very hard time being an effective voice in American politics for quite a while. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', will be back right after this.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed,
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the vanguard of personal freedom, personal liberty, and personal responsibility, Mojo 50 Radio. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Let's discuss the impeachment nonsense for a minute. As you may know, there have been 2 impeachments in the more than 22-decade history of the U.S. presidency, covering now 45 different individuals. Only 2 of them have been impeached. Their job performance was seen as so bad by Congress that they wanted to remove them from office, but only a vote of the Senate following an impeachment vote can do that. Now, in the case of the others, the 2 presidents who actually have been impeached, that took 1 vote each in the House of Representatives. 1. I mean, 1. Donald Trump has now seen 3 impeachment votes in the House of Representatives. None of them have even been close to moving forward. So I think it's fair to say, after 3 impeachment votes, 2 of them before the Mueller report became public and 1 since, the case for impeaching Trump cannot be made. Nevertheless, the reasons for impeaching Trump can be articulated, and back in December of 2017, Al Green, Democrat of Texas, laid that out during an interview on NBC.
You took that in terms of putting together some impeachment efforts. They did fail this week. You forced the vote on the House floor. I want to just outline the 2 articles, one for associating the presidency with white nationalism, neo-Nazism, and hatred, another for inciting hatred and hostility. So a bit later today, I am speaking with Congressman Emanuel Cleaver, as you know, among the overwhelming number of Democrats who voted against it. Do you this morning feel a bit let down by your fellow Democrats?
No, I don't. I have not one scintilla of regret. For edification purposes, the Honorable John Lewis voted with us. The Honorable Benny Thompson did as well. When Rosa Parks took that seat on the bus, she didn't do it assuming that she would end segregation in the South at that time. She did it because it was the right thing to do. In fact, it was the righteous thing to do. And sometimes you have to do the right thing, and perhaps it'll become the spark. We had 58 votes. That's nearly a third of the Democratic caucus, and it's about 57 more than a good many people thought we would have. When Dr. King went to jail, he didn't think that he would end segregation while he was there in the Birmingham jail, but he did the right thing. You have to stand up to hate and you have to fight it. You can't try to placate hate. You've got to stand and look it in the eye and let it know that you're there to defend and protect people that would be victims. Let me add this. When the president associates the presidency with the neo-Nazis, with the hate mongers in Charlottesville, he's legitimizing to a certain extent in their minds what they're doing. These people leave and they go back to jobs where they're serving food to persons of color. One can only imagine what they do to the food. Some of them probably have jobs as loan officers. One can only imagine why people don't get loans that they're qualified for because of a neo-Nazi possibly being the person who's taking the application. So what we've got to do is stand up to hate. And to the persons who did not, I have no animus. The persons who didn't vote with us, I have no animus. This was the first step. It's a process. There will be additional efforts made. I don't falter. I won't give up. I won't give out. I'm going to stay in this fight. I did not come to Congress to placate hate.
So when I look at one last question, will you wait to put forth talk of impeachment again until after the Russia investigation concludes, see if there's any evidence of collusion or not? Or as I look at the reasons for your articles of impeachment, they seem to stand independent of Russia.
They are entirely independent of Russia. They don't deal with emoluments. They don't deal with obstruction of justice. It's time for us to put the hate agenda on the congressional agenda. It's time for Congress to weigh in. And I would add this as an important point. Due process is impeachment. That's why it's in Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution. This is a due process question. So the president gets his due process. He's being treated fairly. It would come before the House. It's similar to an indictment, but not the same. This is a means by which a president can be made accountable for his insidious incitement, causing people to do harm to our country that may be irreparable. It may take us generations to overcome some of the ugliness that is being accorded. The statistics from the FBI are showing that hate crimes are up. We've had anecdotal evidence. Now we have the empirical evidence. It's time for some of us to take the stand. Let others come when they can. Maxine Waters was there. Benny Thompson was there. Jim Clyburn was there. Cedric Richmond was there. We have many people. Marsha Fudge was there. People who are determined to fight hate, not placate, not wait until there's a better time. When Dr. King wrote his letter from the Birmingham jail, he wrote it because 8 prominent members of the clergy were saying this is not the time. Wait until the judicial system can handle it. Let's let the law enforcement officers handle it. This is the business of Congress. We ought to take care of our business.
Democratic Congressman Al Green of Texas, thank you, sir, for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
So, no collusion, no sexual harassment, the incitement of hate. I'm not going to play. That's your reason for seeking to remove a duly elected president from office. That was back in December of 2017. They had a vote on the 6th of December. So the president hadn't even been in office a year. And Al Green has stoked up the Congress to actually vote on impeachment. Now, remember, Nancy Pelosi keeps saying she doesn't want this, but you're trying to tell me that an impeachment vote of a president gets to the House floor without the speaker, who happens to be a member of the party seeking impeachment. She's not for it. Come on now. I may have been born at night, but it wasn't last night. Anyway, here is what you have with respect to that impeachment vote.
Am I recognized, Mr. Speaker?
I may proceed.
Thank you. Impeaching Donald John Trump, President of the United States, of high misdemeanors. Resolved that Donald John Trump, President of the United States, is unfit to be president and is impeached for high misdemeanors.
Mr. Speaker, I move to lay the resolution on the table.
Question is on the motion offered by the gentleman from California. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
I request a roll call vote.
Gentleman asks for the ayes and nays.
The gentleman does.
On this vote, the ayes are 364, the nays are 58, with 4 voting present. The motion is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
So Al Green comes out and says we need to impeach Donald Trump because he's a hater, effectively. That went down to defeat 364 to 58. They voted to table the motion, which means it's dead. Doesn't mean you can't bring it up again. But and remember, there are no crimes involved on this. No crimes. Just high misdemeanors, whatever that is. So 364 to 58. And this is December 2017. So we're still looking at a Republican-controlled Congress. Not a big deal. I can understand that. Well, but here's where you may be a little bit on the surprise side. They came back later. Later, as in the next month, which would be after the House. This is still another vote before the 2018 midterm. So again, you still have a Republican-controlled House. They came back a month and a half later. They came back in January of 2018. And Al Green did it again. And the result, wow, 355 to 66. So I guess you could say, oh, they're making progress. Okay. I don't know that I would agree with that, but that's fine. So that's 2 votes out of the way. And then Nancy is politicking, everybody's politicking, but then Trump told people that if you don't like the country, you need to go ahead and get hat. And, of course, that triggered the hate again. Again. And as a result, Al Green stirred it up again. And on the, I believe it was the 16th of July, you had another vote. NBC reported on that vote in this manner.
Hans Nichols, this is something that is not going away. We're now on, day 4 of this discussion over the president's racist attack. And these lawmakers are not backing off either.
You get the sense the president is always looking for a foil to run against, always looking for Democratic opponents for which to sharpen his distinctions, his differences, and he clearly has it. One quick point on to Brendan's point, and if you got to run, you got someone on the Hill.
I do, only because I'm told that Kelly O'Donnell, our colleague over on the Hill, has some developing news in from us from House Speaker Pelosi. Kelly, what's up?
Our team caught up with Speaker Pelosi. This is not on camera, but they asked her reaction. Does she support the resolution from Congressman Al Green? And the answer was, no, I don't. And then, in a very Speaker Pelosi way, she said, does that surprise you? Again, going back to, let's look at her history, let's look at her leadership on this, and her plan for dealing with anything in impeachment. So the key thing is that she opposes this Congressman Al Green of Texas resolution, and that will set a tone for how things proceed today. That's just moments ago from our team here in the cavernous Capitol as Speaker Pelosi was walking down the hall.
Boy, Kel, keep your phone charged and your sneakers on. Thank you.
Yes, we were going to have another vote. We did have another vote. Another vote on this thing happening again. And it happened before, I think the day before Trump had his most recent rally. And as a matter of fact, Donald Trump spoke about the impeachment vote, the third one of his presidency, at that rally.
Meanwhile, in the House of Representatives 2 days ago, remember, they passed a resolution condemning what the president said regarding the go back tweets and whatnot. Yesterday in the House of Representatives, they had a procedural vote that would have led to voting on articles of impeachment. But Democrats joined Republicans. It was bipartisan for a change in effectively killing the articles of impeachment in the House of Representatives. The final vote was 332 to 95. 137 Democrats voted with the Republicans. They do not want this impeachment issue to come back to haunt them in 2020.
And Kevin McCarthy said, was kind of brilliant. He said they didn't actually vote against impeachment. They voted to table it down the line, made it easy for Democrats to vote against it. The president mentioned it. But let's be honest. I mean, is this really grounds for impeachment that you've seen, the Mueller report, and what it has and what we've seen?
Well, wait a minute.
You basically you don't like his tone and tenor or him. You can't just throw out a president because you don't like him.
Well, it was collusion, impeachment.
Right.
Then it was obstruction, impeachment. Racism, impeachment. President touched on this last night. Listen.
I just heard that the United States House of Representatives has overwhelmingly voted to kill the most ridiculous project I've ever been involved in, the resolution, how stupid is that, on impeachment. I want to thank those Democrats because many of them voted for us. The vote was a totally lopsided 332 to 95 to 1. This vote was so big, I have to thank many of the Democrats. I mean, that was amazing. No, I really do. I respect it. I really do. That was a slaughter. But many of those people that voted for us this afternoon, in somewhat of a sneak attack, a real sneak attack, many of those people that voted for us were Democrats, and I want to thank them because they did the right thing for our country.
At least for now.
He said the resolution. How stupid is that? He said, strongest economy, lowest unemployment. We have rebuilt the most powerful military. It was totally depleted when I took office, and now it's rebuilt. He said we passed the largest tax cuts. We took care of our great vets, Veterans Choice, and Veterans Accountability. And they want to impeach. It's a disgrace.
Well, just because they voted to table the articles of impeachment, that doesn't mean we're not going to hear that I word between here and November.
It's not over.
And don't forget, Robert Mueller comes on Wednesday, next Wednesday,
over.
at least for now. So I'm sure some people will be clamoring regardless of what he says.
Indeed, regardless of what he says. Let me see if I can round this up for you. There have been 3, count them, 3 impeachment votes during Donald Trump's time as president. In the whole history, the 22-decade, 220-year history of the presidency prior to Donald Trump, there had been a total of 2 votes. So I've gotten more votes on impeachment in one presidential term than I've had in the entire history of the presidency. This is ridiculous. Now, there are 435 congressional districts, 1 representative each, which means there's a total of 435 votes. 3 times that number to go with the 3 votes would be 1,305 votes. So of 1,305 votes, you had 364, you had 355, and 332 going against it. That adds up to, oh my gosh, 1,051 votes saying we're not going to impeach this president. And in the last vote, which was 332 to 95, since all the yay votes were pretty much, no, they weren't, because there were 4 non-Democrats who went along with it. There are some Republicans, and there's Justin Amash, who is no longer a Republican. So the majority of Democrats said, no, we ain't doing this. 1,051 votes out of 1,300 votes said, no, we will not impeach. So what effectively is going on with Congress is I have one Al Green going out there and telling everybody that we need to get rid of this guy. He's hateful. We need to get rid of him. He's terrible. He's inciting hate. I don't have any crimes, but a whole lot of misdemeanors. This guy needs to go. And he's telling the president, I don't want you, I don't need you, or the country doesn't need you. But the rest of the House is listening to a different Al Green.
Ooh, baby, let's stick together, loving you weather, and the good, the bad, happy or sad.
Yes, the House of Representatives, despite one Al Green wanting to break up the relationship between Congress and the presidency. The rest of them want to stay together. Good times, bad times, tweets, whatever else that comes up, we want to stick with the president. Interesting. Guys, let's remember this. Impeachment of a president, that's going to occur when it is determined by the House of Representatives that he has committed acts that can be described as either high crimes, well, actually high crimes and misdemeanors, I guess you could say, or. And again, in the more than 2-century history of the presidency, under the current Constitution, only 2 have suffered that judgment. It only took 1 vote each to get him. President Andrew Johnson was impeached in 1868 for violating an act of Congress that became law over his veto. Andrew Johnson had his veto overridden so many times, I don't even know if he bothered to show up to work. The Senate wouldn't convict him. I think they missed by 1 vote of convicting him, and that would have removed him from office. So impeachment doesn't get him out of office anyway. President Bill Clinton was impeached in 1998 because he perjured himself before a federal grand jury. Again, the Senate did not convict him. Now, a lot of people would like to count Richard Nixon, or at least put him in as a footnote, but he resigned the presidency rather than face a nearly certain impeachment vote. Don't know if they would have impeached him or not. The vote didn't occur, but he was definitely on his way to getting a vote. All that over the Watergate scandal and cover-up, which made several members of his administration federal convicts. So we've impeached a president who defied law, duly enacted by Congress. We've impeached another president who lied under oath while being investigated. And a third president abandoned the White House rather than face impeachment for crimes he tried to hide. Now, these are all pretty serious misdeeds. I think we'd all agree. But now some random Democrat rhymes with Regro member of the Clown Brown Caucus, Al Green, has determined that if a president issues 280 character internet text messages, that qualifies as a high misdemeanor worthy of impeachment. And that assertion has been so ludicrous that the full House of Representatives has pimp slapped that foolishness 3 times. Now, doubtless he's going to come back. And it's not the first, and it's not the second time. 3 times. Guys, let me help you out with this. You really need to understand what's going on here. The Democrat Party, the white progressives in the Democrat Party, have set up the POC members of the House Democrats to be patsies for something they know is going to get somebody kicked out of Congress. So what you have is the rather, one member of the AOC coven, Rashida Tlaib, who has basically MF'd Trump all over the place as the wonderful mother and role model she is. We're going to impeach the MF'er. Her and her Palestinian flag are going to go and take him down. So she's out there as a Democrat face of impeachment. Nobody cares about Rashida Tlaib. Don't understand this. She's expendable. This is her first term in Congress. If she doesn't make it, she can go back and be a martyr for the Palestinian cause and all. Nobody cares. And now you got Al Green, who's pushed this foolishness all the way to a vote on the floor 3 times, and it has been embarrassingly rejected. Well, guess what? He's a member of the Clown Brown Caucus. They're never accountable. They can do anything. These are the same guys who've been talking about 40 acres and a mule since 1989. How's that going? Oh, we had a hearing. Okay, you had a hearing. Let me help you out. The likelihood that the Democrats are going to retain control of the House of Representatives is not that high. And even though they have it, what did the hearings result in? They ain't moving. They ain't going nowhere. So the white progressives have put the POC members of the Democrat Party out there on impeachment. So when it fails, they can say plausible denial. We just didn't think that was a reasonable thing. We applaud the members for their passion and their fire, but obviously that's just not the right way for us to try to run the United States government. And of course, Nancy Pelosi, who's behind it all, gives herself plausible denial. And if you believe that she doesn't want this, you are smoking crack. The one thing now that you see Al Green as the ringleader under Pelosi, her lapdog, he's a pet. He is a white progressive woman's pet. If you honestly believe that Nancy Pelosi is not telling him, get it, Al, do it, Al, while she sits back and says, no, I don't want that. That's really not good for him. If you really believe that she's not behind this, you're crazy. This is ridiculous. This is foolishness. It's not going to work. It can't work. But the one thing that gets me is not how many times he has embarrassingly gotten his behind handed to him. It's the fact that other black people, people of color, lack the character and class to be embarrassed by someone who associates himself with them putting on this type of a clown show. And I'll say this for blacks. If you aren't embarrassed by this, then you'll never understand why the United States of America no longer takes black people seriously when it comes to politics. Because they see blacks clowning, and this is another example of clowning, and as a result, they have no regard for you. If you don't want to change that, that's your business. But that's the reason. And with that, I'll turn this over to my good friend, Ron Edwards, and after that, we'll be back with hour 2 of Black Man Thinking.
In a nation that tries to instill unearned self-esteem in its children, it sure lacks in the effort to protect them. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, according to Mike Adams of naturalnews.com, a child protection bill with broad bipartisan support is under fire by Google because the child protection bill would hold the Silicon Valley tech giants accountable for their alleged complicity in allowing underage children to be abused and sex trafficked via other platforms, specifically against underage children. There are many, including certain tech companies, that profit from child sex trafficking. If passed, the Stop Enabling Sex Trafficking Act would amend the Communications Decency Act established in 1934. Many believe that big tech companies like Google would no longer be shielded from liability for sex crimes committed on their platforms, specifically against underage children. Perhaps if children were deemed valuable enough to be protected from murder in and outside of the womb, maybe they would have already been more protected from pedophilers and sex traffickers. I'm Ron Edwards. Join me live Fridays at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern on AmericanMatters.us and 6 p.m. Mountain on KYAH, AM 540, Delta, Utah.
Ron Edwards, the new voice of America.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinkin here on the vanguard of personal freedom, personal liberty, and personal responsibility, Mojo 50 Radio. Also, WDDQ Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. I wanted to hit on this, and I've talked about it before, I'm certain. But the much ado about nothing known as the federal minimum wage. We know that Democrats and Democratic socialists are out trumpeting this as the greatest thing to end poverty in the United States. Didn't they try to end poverty in the United States starting back in 1964? Have we pumped about some ungodly amount of money we've pumped into anti-poverty programs since the war on poverty begun? Don't we have no fewer people poor in the United States as a percentage than we did in 1964? Okay. So this is an anti-poverty thing. And this is a platform for the Democrats to run on. And this past week, on the 18th of July, the Democrats broke out in celebration because in the House, the minimum wage bill to raise the minimum wage for the first time since 2009, I believe, was passed.
On this vote, the yeas are 231 and the nays are 199. This bill is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
In the greatest country on earth, nobody with the dignity of a full-time job should suffer the indignity of not being able to provide for themselves or their loved ones.
The Raise the Wage Act gives up to 33 million Americans a long overdue raise. 33 million Americans.
This bill would increase the minimum wage gradually. This is not a bad for business piece of legislation, as my colleagues across the aisle allege. It's a good for everyone bill.
Mr. Speaker, a rise in opposition to H.R. 582, the Raise the Wage Act, or as it should be called, Raising Unemployment for American Workers Act.
You know, I think it's laughable for anybody in this House to say that the government's going to raise your wages. Government doesn't raise wages. What the government does is provide an environment for businesses to raise wages, and that's where the decision should be.
This bill would cause disruptive job losses and harm entry-level workers in many regions around the country, effectively knocking the bottom rung off the career ladder and especially hurting young workers.
So you heard the arguments on both sides. The Democrat-controlled House passes this. It actually raises the minimum wage, more than doubles it from the current $7.25 an hour up to $15 an hour by 2025. And you heard the chanting. Why is it the Democrats progressives always like to chant? No justice, no peace. What do you want? Dead cops? When do you want them? Pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. I have no idea what they were chanting, but they were chanting. They were chanting then. They chant all the time. It's like it's being a member of a cult. There's always a chant of one type or another with progressives. But I digress. Now, USA Today. ABC. I'm sorry. ABC came out the same day with their report on the House action, but it has a slightly less upbeat tenor to it.
For the first time in a decade, the House has approved legislation to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. Democrats pushed the bill through Thursday with the party line vote of 231 to 199, but it has almost no chance in the Republican-controlled Senate. A hike in the $7.25 hourly wage has been a top Democratic campaign promise. It's intended to address income inequality that's driving the 2020 political debate. If passed, the legislation would, for the first time, pay tipped workers the same as others earning minimum wage. That would boost their pay to $15 an hour, too. Currently, the federal wage for tipped employees is $2.13. Republicans argue that the move would cost jobs. States are already able to raise the wage beyond the federal minimum, and many, including California, have done so.
So let's get the takeaway from this. The House passed it. Wasn't a great large margin. It was pretty much along party lines. In fact, 6 Democrats voted against the bill. 6 Democrats voted against increasing the minimum wage. Ooh, I guess they're going to get primaried. Also, it's dead on arrival in the Senate. It's not going anywhere. And the reasons are the same ones that you heard from that debate in the prior clip was from House members who are Republicans saying what this does that is negative. But here's something else. USA Today, back in July of 2017, they filed a report on the result of increasing the minimum wage in the city of Seattle, not to $15 an hour, but to $13 an hour. The minimum wage went up to $13 an hour, and here's their report.
In Seattle, many businesses must pay a minimum wage of at least $13 an hour. Now, a new study from the University of Washington says the knock-on effect of that law has left low-wage workers with less money in their pockets because some employers cut working hours. According to Reuters, the research paper said low-wage workers now clock 9% fewer hours on average and earn $125 less each month than before the city set one of the highest minimum wages in the nation. The federal minimum wage has stayed at $7.25 an hour since 2009. The Republican-controlled U.S. Congress has opposed an increase.
Now, that was 2017, and that's why it referred to the House still being controlled by the Republican Party. Well, that's not the case anymore. But did you hear that? They increased the minimum wage to $13 an hour, and people made less money. Are you hearing me? People made less money. Why did they make less money? Because just because you increase the minimum wage doesn't increase your employer's revenues to pay. They still have a fixed pool of money based on their revenues, and Congress is not compelling people to come in off the street and go to a restaurant or someplace else where a minimum wage worker would be employed to make sure that there are excess revenues to cover these wage increases. So as a result, employers said, okay, I got to pay more money. Well, guess what? I don't have it. So I'm going to keep my labor costs constant, which means if the cost of an hour of labor goes up, then for my cost to be constant, the number of hours worked will go down. And people who are minimum wage workers, who were all jazzed about the big increase in Seattle, saw themselves with $125 less money per pay period. That hurts. If that's $125 a week, that's $500 a month. That hurts. Is anybody starting to figure this out? The federal government has no business telling anybody how much money they should make or they should be paid, more to the point. They have no business telling anyone how much they should pay their employees. Yes, we've been doing it since the 1930s. No, it wasn't a good idea then either. But this is what you get. Once you have a crisis, particularly an economic crisis, you have progressives ready to jump into the breach because they are not going to let a crisis go to waste. So, They've now done something that doesn't even matter. We've increased the minimum wage. Yay, let's go chant, let's go celebrate. It ain't going nowhere. It's got two hurdles that it would have to high jump and its legs are too short. It's not going to make it through the Senate. And if you honestly think Donald Trump is going to pass or sign a minimum wage, a more than doubling of the minimum wage, you know what? Let me be frank. I'm not certain that he would not sign it, but I'm definitely not confident that he would. What I am confident about is that Mitch McConnell and the boys are simply going to say no. They may not even. More than likely, it won't even get debated in the Senate. It's like no. I'm glad you guys over there in that chamber had your little party. Hope everybody danced and sang, had cake and cookies and everything else. It's not going anywhere here. And then when you start hearing things like what you just heard about what happened in Seattle, we raised the minimum wage, and the people affected by minimum wage regulations lost money. They went to work less often. They came home with less money. Is that what you want? Well, everybody's stingy. No, guys. People who don't understand that the minimum wage is a bad idea have never run a business. They don't understand what business is. People who run businesses hate minimum wages because not only does it take more money out of their business, it doesn't even allow them to adequately reward workers who go above and beyond, because I have to pay everybody something. Now, it does take jobs away from the lower tier, because if I have a minimum wage, you know what? I can't bring in a bunch of nothing teenagers and pay them so much money that I'm just basically throwing money away, because I'm not going to get anywhere near the value back of the money I'm paying. So I'm not going to hire them. But here is the thing that I find most, and I do mean most, interesting. In all this discussion about the minimum wage, does it kill jobs? Does it end poverty? Well, it definitely didn't end poverty in Seattle. Might have contributed to a little bit more poverty. Does it hurt business? Does it help business? Democrats think this helps business. I'm not exactly. What helps business is revenue. This is not a revenue. This is basically creating outgo. Income helps business. Outgo does not. And this is more outgo. But what I want to inform you of is very interesting. For the last year for which data is available is 2017 from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You can look this up yourself on BLS.gov. In March of 2018, they came out with a report saying the characteristics of minimum wage workers for the year 2017. I wasn't able to find a report so far this year for minimum wage workers for last year, 2018. In 2017, it reads, 80.4 million workers aged 16 or older were paid at hourly rates. Doesn't say they're paid minimum wage, they're just paid hourly. Representing 58.3% of all wage and salary workers. So more than half, almost 60% of everyone who's working in the United States gets paid by the hour. Wait a minute. So you're telling me how many people are salaried employees? Wow, okay. Okay. Among those paid by the hour, this is 80.4 million. Among those paid by the hour, 542,000 workers earned exactly the prevailing minimum wage, federal minimum wage of $7.25. Another 1.3 million had wages below the federal minimum wage. So together you had 1.8 million workers with at or below wages wages that were at or below the federal minimum wage, and that made up 2.3% of all hourly paid workers. Remember that hourly paid workers only make up 60% of the workforce. So what are we talking about? You just did this big thing and went into the massive happy dance for something that affects 1% of workers in the United States. Did you hear that? 1% of workers in the United States, so between 1 and 2%. I'm going to be generous. Let's say it's 2%. 2% of people who work in the United States make at or below the minimum wage. This is what you're doing the happy dance about. Nancy Pelosi said something about 33 million people. There's only 1.8 million workers in the United States who make at or below the minimum wage. Where is she getting her numbers from? Are you picking up on this? Democrats always lie. Socialists can't help but lie. When you put Democrats and socialists together, you have a lying wonder. Bernie Sanders, a lying wonder. Everything's free. We can do it. We just have to understand how we're going to do it, but we can do it. College tuition is free. Health care for all is free. Medicare for all is free. But he finally had to admit that he was going to raise taxes on that. Somebody pinned him to the wall until he finally said, yeah, well, they will pay a little bit in taxes, but all their health care costs will be free. Let me help you out. I can decide whether or not I want to go to a doctor. I can avoid that cost or defer that cost or delay that cost or find alternatives to paying that cost. You're going to pay those taxes. Know this, you're going to pay them taxes. You're not going to avoid that. And then, of course, there's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, leader of the AOC Coven of Witches, who says we need a Green New Deal and we're going to get rid of all fossil fuels because in 12 years the world's going to end. Then why am I doing this, Chica? Why was this a big deal if, I'll say it this way, if I can find the information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that says that about 1% of all workers in America earn at or below the minimum wage, that was 2017. If you go to 2016, you know what? Here's an interesting thing. In 2016, 58.7% of all workers were hourly. So it went from 58.7 in 2016 down to 58.3. People are becoming permanent salary employees a little bit more as time goes by. And by the way, there were 2.2 million workers back in 2016 with wages at or below the minimum wage. Wait a minute. It was only 1.8. So what people are already getting a raise without anybody doing anything to the minimum wage. It's going down from 2.2 to 1.8, and there were more workers in the United States in 2017 as opposed to 2016. Why? Because the economy got better. Are you picking up on this? Oh, final piece of information to really help you understand this, because you do need to understand this. What is the average hourly rate of pay in the United States? Well, wages in the United States, according to tradingeconomics.com, wages in the United States expected to be $23.91 by the end I think it's probably the end of the third quarter of 2019. Looking forward, they estimate wages in the United States to stand at $24.08 in. Can you wait a minute? The average, not median, because median you'd have as many above and below, but average is already right around $24 an hour. Please explain to me who you're helping. Because, well, what about all the? You're telling me we have a workforce that's about 160 million people. You're doing this for a number of people. You're affecting a number of people that's less than 2%. And you think that is going to lift the masses out of poverty. Let's remember one other thing that we can kind of put in our cap there. It doesn't matter what the feds do. The states can set whatever minimum wage they want. California's gone on there. Washington, at least Seattle, a city did. They set their own. It's a federal minimum. The state can go higher. So here's what would make sense. See, and this is part of the thing that you have to understand with progressives. Progressives do not want the states to operate in a federalist mode. They want to push everything into the central government where nobody has control but them. And the states that would want to do something different, obviously they hate people, they want to cage children, they don't want people to get health care, all the things that come out here. We have 50 governors in the United States, 51 if you count Puerto Rico. We have 99 state legislative chambers in the United States, because there's one state that only has one chamber. Which means we have lawmakers and executives in every state in the union. If their people want the minimum wage for people living in their state to be at a certain level, let them set it. California has said it, and of course, California is bleeding businesses left and right. I'm aware, I live here. They're bleeding businesses. People are not coming to California. They're leaving California. Same is happening in Illinois. The same is happening in New York State. The same is happening in New Jersey. Where the taxes are high, the populations are decreasing. Where are people going? Well, heck, Texas, Florida, Tennessee. If you're in Massachusetts, just go over to New Hampshire. Places where the taxes are lower and the government's a little bit less intrusive. When you look at Democrats and what they try to accomplish for people, they do much more to people than they do for them. Passing the minimum wage is much ado about nothing. If I'm trying to help the American worker, the last thing I'm going to do is make my number one priority something that affects less than 2%. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin'. We'll be back right after this.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin'.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the vanguard of personal freedom, personal liberty, and personal responsibility, Mojo 50 Radio. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of the show, and I want to talk about something that's really bugging me, but I also want to go back and reach back into something on the last topic, which was minimum wage. You do realize if the average minimum wage is still 50% higher than what Congress wants to raise it to, and the minimum wage that they want to raise only affects 1.5%, maybe 2% at most of all workers, nobody needs help. The American people already know how to make more money than the minimum wage, and that's on average. So the Democrat Party is selling you a bill of goods by saying they're going to help you by raising the minimum wage. If you really need help to make $15 an hour when the average wage and salary in the United States is near 24, yeah, you need to vote for Democrats, all right, because you're stupid. Final segment of the show, black duplicity regarding Donald Trump. What am I talking about here? See, this is the reason why I am constantly telling people that these white progressives, pets of color, these people who are, little more than race pimps and plantation trustees, they're not real black folks. And this goes back a ways. I spoke at in the first segment of the show about white people having been put on a road towards silence 50 years ago, where white men in particular were not allowed to say anything because everything they said was from a position of how much they had hurt somebody else. They had hurt black men, black women. They had hurt Hispanic men. They were, as some would say, they were the devil. I mean, okay. But now whites are coming out of that shell and they're starting to speak up again. And it's actually a good thing for the country, but it's not a great thing for progressives. Because the people that they've wanted to keep down for 50 years and keep their voice out of the public square represent 65% of the country. If they decide to speak, there's really not much you can do to stop them. But also 50 years ago, black people had an inordinate amount of political influence in the country due to the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement in and of itself did not do anything. There was a moral purpose that was tied to the ethic of the country. Blacks tapped into that and basically put the question consistently to white people, are we citizens? Are you trying to tell me that because you don't like my skin color, I'm not a citizen because you're not treating me like one? So are you trying to tell me that no matter what I do, I can serve in the military, I can take care, I can hold down a job, I can have and raise a family, I can do all those things, but you don't want to treat me like a citizen? I don't accept that treatment. And they stood against that treatment, took a great deal of punishment for it because it was a nonviolent movement on their side only. And through the force of moral suasion and the courage they showed to stand for what they believed that they deserved, they won America over. They changed laws without basically having the right to vote. Remember, it's like, we got to sign you over, blacks can't vote. But they still influenced state and federal law. Laws appeared on behalf of people who could not vote. Blacks had real political power, so much political power that a gentleman from Texas who became president once said, allegedly, or at least that is, it's in a book and it hasn't been refuted, that he spoke, I believe it was the two governors on Air Force One. Well, no, that's a different conversation. But the words were this: these Negroes, I don't know if he used the word Negroes, they're getting uppity. And that's a problem for us, because now they have something they didn't have before, and that is political power to go with their uppityness. This is a problem for us. We got to do something. We've got to give them a little something. Enough to keep them quiet, but not enough to make a difference. Let me tell you what I understand what he gave them to be, that, and I'm only evaluating it from its effect. He gave blacks the Civil Rights Act, two of them, and the Voting Rights Act. That didn't end racism. That didn't end segregation. What it did do is end the Civil Rights Movement. What ended segregation in the South was not the laws of the federal government. It was the moral superiority of the position that black people took and held in spite of opposition. Was there help from the federal government? Not denying that. But that wasn't enough to carry the day. But these people who did so much somehow became duped, and I mean deeply duped. Because they came to believe that a lifelong Texas segregationist had miraculously seen the light on equality just because he ascended to the presidency. LBJ was a racist from way back. He was a segregationist from way back. And he had told people that based on the changes he was seeking that we now know as civil rights, that he was going to have those Negroes, and I know he didn't use that word Negro, voting Democratic for the next 200 years. We're 50 years into that, and the voting rates for black Americans is in the high 80s to low 90s for Democrats. It is as close to a monolith as you can find. And the interesting thing is, blacks unfortunately have this desire to follow leaders who they choose to trust, even if the leaders are not necessarily trustworthy. Martin Luther King was a trustworthy leader as long as you kept women who were not his wife away from him, because he was a serial adulterer. Doesn't mean he wasn't a great leader, doesn't mean he didn't have passion for the cause, but he was greatly flawed. But blacks would follow him, and they followed him until he was killed. And his death, coupled with the passage of civil rights legislation, pretty much ended the civil rights movement. And the interesting thing to me is the same people who were duped into believing a lifelong Texas segregationist had changed his mind about black people because he ascended to the presidency. The same political chumps and traitors to their race walking around with black skin, they now believe that someone who was applauded and welcomed for decades in the black community suddenly became a racist just because he ascended to the presidency. I don't get that. And a couple of those leaders that people choose to trust, even though they're not necessarily trustworthy, would be Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. Now, both of those people are outspoken critics of Donald Trump today. However, as a matter of fact, I want to play some of this for you. September 2017, Jesse Jackson goes after Donald Trump on a range of issues.
32 white owners, he feels has a right to fire players, to take away their jobs as they exercise their First Amendment right. Their First Amendment right to speak and to protest nonviolent and a non-threatening way is a legal right, a constitutional right. Also, his right to fair employment is a right that's also being ignored. And it's clearly that the president was ignoring the legal rights and feeding black players to a howling crowd that's red meat. Well, it is about race. And clearly, it was just as saying President Obama was born in Kenya was about race. Or saying the Mexican-American judge could not dispense justice was about race. Or equating the Klan and the supremacists and the neo-Nazis in Charlottesville, Virginia with nonviolent protesters was really about race and upholding the legacy of the statues that represent slavery and secession, sedition and segregation. It's about race. And he says that his base exploit the unfounded fears of those who follow him blindly. And by making it the issue commensurate with the flag, commensurate with military soldiers, that diverted attention from the real agenda. People did not fight wars for the flag, they fought wars for dignity. People didn't go to World War II. The flag, they went to stop genocide, they went to stop extermination over people. Part of Kaepernick's power is the rightness of his cause, the silence and dignity with which he's carried it out, his capability of playing, his competence to play football and being denied his right to a job. All those kind of make him a model figure. So whether it's Jesse Owens, Jackie Robinson, Ali, Kurt Flood, Bill Russell, Oscar Robertson, Kaepernick, he's now in that lineage of great athletes who've had an impact upon the game and the culture. Those who kneel, referring to their mothers in derogatory language, does not just apply to a race. It applies to whoever football player does this. You now have engulfed in this discussion Steph Curry and the Warriors and LeBron James. But it's going to go into base. It's going to morph into something much bigger than what it was because President Trump has put more matches and gas on the dry field and the wind is blowing.
Jesse Jackson is clearly getting old. That was from September 2017. Rambling, talking loud, saying nothing. Let me break some of this down. When he's talking about NFL athletes and he's talking about a right to work, and excuse me, these are contracts. You don't have a right to a contract. Well, they got a union. I said, well, that doesn't mean that just because you're only a member of the union if you actually play in the NFL. If nobody wants you to play, your union membership means what? And if you can't perform, or if people do not believe you can perform, then why would they want you on their team? And despite all the rhetoric to the contrary, people keep forgetting that Colin Kaepernick, since he wanted to make it about Colin Kaepernick, was the least accurate quarterback in the NFL the last 2 years he played. Colin Kaepernick set a record, a single game record for poor quarterback play in the last year he played when the San Francisco 49ers went up against the Chicago Bears. As a matter of fact, he had more sacks against him than he had passing yards thrown. That's how bad it was. To say that he's better than other quarterbacks in the NFL, well, he's the one who holds the record for single game incompetence. Who's he better than? Well, you heard that. In January of 2018, you got another word salad from Jesse Jackson And I'll just say, the older he gets, the harder he is to understand, not just because his speaking pattern is hard to follow, but then some of the things he says really don't seem to have a very coherent thread.
And this language of Donald Trump has been a source of shame for our nation, humiliation, and untruth. With Africa, we have a trade surplus with Africa. Every firestorm tide driven down the American road came from the plantations of Liberia, the gold from Ghana, uranium and diamonds from the Congo. Africa is the most abundant continent and the largest continent, where the Atlantic Oceans come together and kiss at the tip of South Africa. And as for Haiti, Haiti was our ally in the Revolutionary War. Every baseball Babe Ruth ever hit was made in Haiti. So it's just flat out ignorance. But the American public deserves better. But you get what you vote for, but you don't vote for. 2018 will be a chance to make a difference. If we vote our hopes this year, not our fears, we can stop this tragedy.
Haiti was our ally in the Revolutionary War, which should mean what to me nearly 2.5 centuries later? Every baseball that Babe Ruth hit was made in Haiti. And that means what? Because the place is still a horrendous failure of a nation. And to talk about Africa's resources have nothing to do with Africa's people. The people of Africa did not put the gold or the diamonds in the ground. They did not plant the trees. They did not do these things. Africa's resources are there for Africa, no matter what manner or what color of people live on the land. And of course, I believe he was responding to the alleged comments that were made actually by Dick Durbin. Dick Durbin is the only person that I heard a politician say that different African nations and Haiti were fecal void countries. He's the only person I ever said. They ascribed it to Trump, but we still have never heard anybody say, except for a progressive Democrat, that Donald Trump said it. And the only people we have on record saying it are news anchors and progressive Democrats. So that's what you believe you're getting when you listen to all this, but perhaps you're not aware that there was a time when Jesse Jackson apparently had a very different opinion of Donald Trump. These are two different occasions where Jesse Jackson spoke of Donald Trump, the first being back in January of 1998.
I do want to express thanks to you, Donald Trump, for being with us tonight. We need your building skills, your gusto, your rent package for people on Wall Street who represent diversity. And we thank you for coming tonight. Let's give Donald Trump a big hand. A big hand for Donald Trump. I now want to bring forth a friend who has, he is deceptive in that his social style is of such. One can miss his seriousness and his commitment, but his success is beyond argument. When we opened this Wall Street project and we talked about it, he gave us space at 40 Wall Street, which was to make a statement about our having a presence there. And beyond that, in terms of reaching out and being inclusive, he's done that too. And created for many people a comfort zone when I ran for the presidency in 84 and 88. And many others thought it was either laughable or something to avoid. He came to our business meeting here in New York because he has this sense of the curious and a will to risk to make things better. And so aside from all of his style and his pizzazz, he's a serious person who's an effective builder of people. Last year he was a part of our workshop, of our panel workshop on what are the challenges and opportunities. And so a year later, Donald Trump, for a few minutes, challenges and opportunities to embrace the underserved communities. Donald Trump.
I will tell you, a large percentage of the people, and especially in construction, that are building these great jobs are black and minorities, and I'm very proud of it. We have close to 25%, and I think the number's going up, and they do a great job. There are no better builders than we have in New York, and a big percentage of that is black and minority folks. So I just want to thank everybody in the room for being here. I look forward to some questions, and then I don't know how we're ever going to leave this building today, because if you look outside, it is terrible, but we'll figure a way. There's always a way, and thank you, Jesse, and congratulations.
So, who or what changed? Because you have to remember, he mentioned that Donald Trump was kind of on board for him when he ran for president in 1984 and 1988, and this was 10 years after that. Donald Trump hasn't changed. But Jesse Jackson, who also once condemned abortion, that was before he ran for president, he had to make a choice as to who was going to line his pocket. He could go with a message that was moral, that was correct, and that would perhaps build black people, or he could go with the message of the Democrat Party, which would ensure him livelihood. He took the latter path. Donald Trump didn't move away from Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson moved away from Donald Trump. And that move didn't really occur then. It only occurred when Donald Trump sought the presidency. Now, there's another guy who has a similar issue with Donald Trump, but he didn't seem to have it back in 2004 when he participated in a roast at the Friars Club. I mean, you don't invite your enemies to roast you at the Friars Club back in 2004, and that was Al Sharpton.
Little did I think in all my years in show business that the Friars would have to rely on Al Sharpton to save the show, but that's exactly where we are right now. Now let's see, which one is Al Sharpton? Oh yeah, there he is, right there. I remember him. Reverend Al has never seen so many white people under one roof. Neither have I. Anyway, Reverend Al, did you know that he is going to be the next television talk show host? Not kidding about this. He's going to start a show, I believe, on Spike TV, right, Reverend Al? And it's going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be like anybody else's talk show. Reverend Al is going to be the host and the guest. And if he feels like it, he'll announce himself. He's a very colorful New York character. Reverend Al Sharpton, everybody.
Thank you, Regis. First, I'm very happy to be here, but I must urge the Friars Club to have sensitivity training. You can start with the guy that called and invited me to come. He called and he said, Reverend Sharpton, we'd like to invite you to the Friars Club as we are going to have a roast for Donald Trump. I said, yes. He says, you know the Friars Club? I said, I've been there many times. Julian Roy Rifkin used to bring me. Oscar Cohen, I know the Friars Club. He says, so you know what a roast is? I said, yes. He says, you can't bring any Molotov cocktails now. I said, well, I consider that a little bias in your assessment of how I travel. I said, well, let me ask you something. I said, how many, well, let me put it this way, sir. How diverse will the audience be? He said, oh, that won't be a problem. We'll have as many blacks there as Donald has living in his buildings. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that Donald is very much for the cause of civil rights. I went and asked him after the third or fourth time I saw blacks fired on his show. I said, Donald, Omarosa, Kwame, Stacy, what's up with this? He said, Reverend Al, I want to believe that we can make the American dream come true. Why should whites be the only ones that deal with me that walk away with nothing? I asked Jeff Zucker, I said, what is the real reason that you brought Donald in to do The Apprentice? Stone Phillips gave me the answer. He said that NBC and Donald have something in common. They both go after women 18 to 49. The truth is, Donald asked me to perform one of his marriages, one of his weddings. We fell out when he wanted me, rather than read the vows, to read the prenuptials during the ceremony. But don't get me wrong, he's an outstanding New Yorker. He's a humanitarian. He called me to his office one day and said, we must do something about those that are not as fortunate as me. He actually wanted to build a homeless shelter for supermodels. And Butch, he is committed to the black cause. He wanted to start a business. He and I, in fact, had drawn up the papers. We were going to call it Reparations Incorporated. And I almost signed until I read the fine print and found out that Donald was getting the 40 acres and I was just getting the mule. Thank you, Donald.
Reverend Al, everybody. First time on a Friars Club Days. Did a terrific job, and good luck on that talk show. And if you need a co-host, Kathy Lee ain't doing much these days.
Let me break this down real quick. So there's actually a couple of good lines in there from Sharpton, roasting Donald Trump as though he is a friend, because that's what happens at a Friars Club roast. But you have to understand this. Now, LBJ was trusted by the black community because people like Al Sharpton, I'm saying he was one of them, people who occupied a similar position in the black community, like Al Sharpton, like Jesse Jackson, said trust LBJ. As a result, their black families, their nuclear families, were destroyed, and there's now a culture of black dependency on government. And Donald Trump was praised by these people, but now things have changed. Donald Trump has presided over record black employment and increasing prosperity among not only blacks but also Latinos. But the same folks who told blacks to trust LBJ when he ascended to the presidency are telling blacks and also Latinos to distrust Donald Trump now that he's ascended to the presidency. You see, when Stockholm Syndrome allows Democrats to keep the pants of POC, people of color, down around their ideological ankles, then POC tend to believe only the things told them by the folks who regularly violate their ideological backsides, even when the story has changed. And that's our show. God bless you. God keep you. Hope everything goes well for you and yours. And if God says the same, we hope to be back with you next week. Do take care.